How's it going, nerds? I'm Wes from Never Bored Gaming, and today we are taking a look at Altenor Secrets Arena from Power of Gamers, coming to Kickstarter September 14th. Like I said, this game is going to be on Kickstarter, so what you see here is very obviously a prototype. Even though we have some really cool minis on the board, we've got some cool mechanics going on here. Everything you see here is in prototype form, so artwork, components, there may be some modifications to the rules along the way. They have stretch goals planned out. So this isn't exactly what you're going to get, but it's going to get me close enough to tell you what it is. And what that is a 1v1 arena combat game. But what really makes it stand out is really the mechanics of how this board works. So the board is a ring, even you have these little like spokes on the outside for starting positions, but the board is a sequence of rings starting in the middle and moving their way out, and they actually shift throughout the game. So every single ring is its own piece, and it can rotate. So as you are playing the game, the entire board is continually moving and shifting, and you can manipulate it, and there's traps that'll make it shift around. So as you're planning your strategies, the objective that you are going for may be moving farther away from you. Maybe you can move it closer to you. Maybe you can move your opponents farther from their objective, but closer to your warriors so that you can go and knock them off the board. That is definitely something that I think makes this game stand apart from other just simple arena combat games. Now, during this game, you do play with a team, so each side has 4 players on their team. You've got your fighter, who is better at fighting, obviously. You've got your guy who can actually control the board, and then you have like your runner, and then your regular guy that are out there trying to complete objectives as you go along. There are multiple ways to score points in this game, whether holding objectives, and a lot of times there's like points on opposite sides of the board that you have to hold both sides during certain rounds to get points. There's these like treasure tokens in the middle of the board that you have to like run in really quick and grab, and you get points for holding on to those. And there's ways that you can try to like knock them out of people's hands. You can steal them. If you knock somebody out while they're holding it, they drop it and you can go pick it up. And then obviously if you knock out your opponents, you can get points for that as well. Another thing that's really cool with points is you have your betting. So at the beginning of the game, each player can make a secret bet as for which objective they think they're going to complete. And it's not just what you're going to do, but a lot of them have to do with you did this objective this much better than your opponent. So you may have to bluff, because if you're super obvious for what you're going for, you know, if you say like, oh, I'm going to get more of these like center treasure tokens than my opponent. I'm trying to get at least 3 more points from those than my opponent does. Well, if they see you just bum rush to the center of the board, then they're going to pick up on that and go, oh, well, I don't even have to get all the points for those. If I can just stay within a certain number of my opponent, then he's going to miss out on his bonus point. So a lot of strategy goes into that, planning, bluffing, and again, it's just a way to get additional points. Another thing that makes this game really cool is the combat. They actually give you the choice between either dice combat or card combat. And I've actually heard a lot of arguments over which form of combat is better, dice or cards. Some people just absolutely love dice combat. Some people hate the randomness of it and they really want the cards. So this game, honestly, they just let you choose. At the beginning of the game, you choose, are we going with dice combat or are we going with card combat? And even in the card combat, you know, it'll be familiar if you've played a lot of games like this before, where you've got a hand of cards numbered 2 to 6. You play a card face down, you both flip up simultaneously. Whoever has the highest attack value is the winner. And the attacker always gets a +1, and fighters always get a +1. So if you're attacking with your fighter, you're at a +2, which is great. But once you play your card face down, you reveal it, you settle that battle, you then discard that card, and you don't have that card in your hand. And the other thing is that you start off at a -1. Your opponent picks one randomly from your hand at the beginning of the game. So you don't really know what your opponent has, although you can do some card counting as the battles rage on, but that's, again, part of the bluffing. If you go discard one of mine, and in the first battle I play a 5, you're probably thinking, oh, I bet I discarded his 6, he played his 5, his highest card is a 4. So that then in a more important battle later on, you can like drop that 6 out and really surprise them. And as you work your way through this hand of cards, and there's other ways to like discard your lower cards if you don't want them, you do get to pick up that hand, discard one randomly again, and then keep going. So it's not like you can only ever use your 6 once, but it is something that like you have to get through all the cards in your hand before you can go back to those high level cards again. And then like I said earlier, you do have the ability to move the actual board, and that is another hand of cards that you have that your character that can control the board gets to play. And it's pretty straightforward for what the card says. It lets you shift a ring either clockwise or counterclockwise, 1 space or 2 spaces or multiple spaces. And these are also cards that like as you play them, they discard, and there is a way to pick up those hand of cards again, but that is somewhat difficult, especially within the limitations of the length of game. So you do have to be pretty strategic when you play these cards and when you're shifting the board around. But it is really fun to like move your opponent closer to your guys. So if they've got like one guy kind of off to the edge, and then you can rotate the board around and bring that guy right in the middle of all of your big strong guys, and you can just like gang up on them and attack. That's really fun. It's cool to like move around to get objectives, and even like these big stand-ups on the board are walls that you can't get through. So there are some parts where you're going to need to move the board around to actually get your guys out from like trapped behind these walls and the traps, because the traps are also one of these places on the board where if you're moving regularly, well, let me just say, every time you hit a trap, you roll the dice, and the dice determines what trap you actually hit. Sometimes it's nothing because you avoided it. Sometimes the trap is just like a lever that also moves the board around. So even if your opponent isn't like tricking you, the board may still move around and shift in a way that you weren't expecting. It may kind of throw off your strategy. So that little bit of randomization in there does... It's kind of like a great equalizer in the game, because you never know what's going to happen. But you could also take damage from these traps. And there is the ability to run. So moving is 1 space, running is 2 spaces in one direction. But if you run through a trap, then you have a higher likelihood of taking damage, because I think if rolling a 3 and a 4 does no damage if you're walking, but it does 1 damage if you're running. So there's definitely a lot of risks and balances, because again, to get to the center of the board to get these treasures can be really difficult unless you have people that are running through. But the likelihood that you have everything lined up perfectly such that you can run through and grab treasure, and there's no walls and no trap and no water, which basically just slows you down, is very difficult. In addition to all of that, there's also plenty of special abilities you could have that you can mix into the hand. And at the beginning of the game, you actually pick 3 abilities, and those are secret, so your opponent doesn't necessarily know which abilities your team has. You could have picked the same secrets. There's 8, I think, special abilities to choose from. So you do have a pretty good variety, and you can pick the abilities that you want that fit your playstyle. And that is just another layer of uniqueness to this game and like customization to really make this game what you want it to be. And that's probably one of the coolest things they have going for this game, is that there are so many ways to customize each individual game, with the dice combat, with which like you can kind of team build a little bit with the guys that you actually add to your team. And through the Kickstarter and probably like stretch goals will unlock more characters, and they're going to be like other versions of this game. Again, this is the first in the universe, but they are building out the Atorium's universe, so you can get like expansions and new teams to fight within the arenas, and these teams could go into other games and do stuff over there. So you customize your teams, you can customize your special ability, you can choose how the combat is actually happening. Like all of that wraps together so that you can create the game that you really want to play. Or if you want to strip it down a little bit, if all of that sounds too complicated, you can certainly like leave out special abilities. You can have just the base starting team. Very customizable and a unique game that really does just keep you on your toes, because the shifting board, the fact that it can shift even when no one is trying to shift it, really does add a level of, like, you feel like you're trapped in a labyrinth. It feels like this competition where they dropped you guys into this place and there's traps and there's walls and there's water, everything's moving around, and you're trying to get these objectives and you never really know what's going to happen next. I think they really nailed it with this game. And then how you win is having the most points at the end of 4 rounds. So a round is activating every player on your team once. There are some things that score mid-rounds, like if you can hold these objectives at the end of rounds or at the end of very specific rounds, or some things just score continuously during the game. Some are at the end of every activation, but they do give you a really nice arena score sheet over here that kind of takes you through the rounds, and it shows you like, hey, mark off which points you actually scored. So it's really easy to keep track of what points are out there, what's available, and who has what. So guys, if you are looking for a 1v1 arena combat game and this sounds like the game for you, there's going to be a link to the Kickstarter campaign down in the description box down below. You can click on that, head on over to the Kickstarter page, check out the stretch goals, check out any updated artwork, get in the comment section over there, ask any questions you have. But most importantly, go ahead and back the game. Or if you're watching this on the Kickstarter page, then you've probably done all of that. But if you haven't backed it, go ahead and click that big old green back button so that you can get your copy of Altenor Secrets Arena. But most importantly, make sure you get back over to our YouTube page so you can click on the Game Toppers link because they sponsor our channel. But in addition to that, we just love playing games on our Game Topper. It really does make a difference playing games on a dedicated gaming tabletop. And then once you've clicked on all the links, backed all the games, given them all your credit card information, make sure you subscribe to our channel so you'll never be bored.